So I think I bring back the slow, sad mood, but that was Susan's recommendation, and I really have to thank you for recommending Women in the Dunes, because it like I've always been fan of Marxist theory and psychoanalyst theory and existentialism, and somehow I was sort of away from existentialism for some time, and a big fan of Sartre and everything, and this film suddenly kind of brings that perspective together of who we are and what's the meaning of life and the meaninglessness and all that, and and so thank you for introducing that. So I kind of want to sort of, for those who have not seen the film, just for the video, want to just give a summary of what the film is, and then we can probably get into talking about it. So there is a school teacher here who arrives to these sand dunes, and he's collecting bugs. He has lost his last bus to civilization, and the villagers offer him to stay in the village, and he's being offered to stay in this sand pit where we have our woman living there for we don't know how long, and she and her house provides a wall for this village to save from this sand that's keep coming in, and she makes buckets of this sand, gives them every night. That's her job. Man is thinking that I'm just going to be here for a night and I'll be gone in the morning, and he's being held captive for to help her, and then he just gets into these different attempts to get out of that place. First he's kind of completely confused what's going on, then he's angry, then he's fearing it, then he gets adjusted to it, and in the end, once he escapes, he doesn't leave, and he stays there. So that's pretty much sort of a short summary of the film. So I'll start with asking you, what do you make of it? What does the film speak to you? I mean, I'm sure it speaks many things, but in if you can summarize for us, what speaks most to you in this film?
Opposing forces that I think are running throughout the narrative. You have obviously the man versus the woman, and you have incarceration versus freedom. You have urban versus rural. You have damnation versus salvation. You have the animate versus the inanimate, and the inanimate would be, let's say, the sand, and the animate are the people. Permanence versus transience. The sand is constantly shifting. I mean, and the house is semi-permanent, but there's that duality. And then oppressor versus victim. So I think those are just a short list of the sort of dual forces that are pulling at the different characters and really even at the setting. And then on top of that, it's really it's a Sisyphean tale, I think at some point he says, do you shovel to live, or do you shovel to survive, or do you survive to shovel? So, which is somewhat existential, obviously, but this idea that they just have this interminable task, and the sand keeps kind of coming down and rotting away everything. So and they never overcome it. It's just this constant battle. So that would be to start with. That's a lot.
No, so all those duality that you expressed here. I mean, I can take each one of those, and I think I can have conversation for a whole day about each one of those. So but I want to start with the very first one. Let's just start with that. So you say man versus woman. I mean, I don't know if it's man versus woman, but let's just try to understand the woman here, and let's try to understand the man, and let's try to understand the sand. So for me, it's like sort of starting point is there are like three major characters here, right? I mean, you have the man, the woman, and the sand. And interestingly, you don't have names for them. Interestingly, the original novel also didn't have names for them. So we're dealing with archetypes here. Obviously, the artist in the film, the writer of the Abe, who wrote the novel, as well as the filmmaker, both, wants us to think in terms of archetypes and not just these individual characters who we could be empathetic with or not. So what kind of woman do we have here?
Well, when I say male versus female, I mean, you're talking in archetypes. I mean, she's much more, she's submissive at times, and at other times she's passive-aggressive. And he's quite aggressive. And I think he's very much sort of fighting his fate, and she sort of accepts it. So to me, that's kind of like what the difference is between the male and the female in this case.
So the way I see the woman is like, I mean, she obviously, not a surprise for him. Like when we see him for the first time arriving to the sand, he's sitting at the sand boat, and he's speaking of his past, how man and woman relationships could be. They're all, we are all fearful of each other. We need ID cards, we need this and that to explain who we are, right? We are constantly, a slave of our fear for the opposite sex, and he even mentions the smallest thing of who talks how much and who is arrogant and who not. I mean, these kind of things breaks. So what kind of certificates do we need to be in a relationship or with somebody or be truthful to somebody and all that? And here he arrives. So the bigger problem for him is deceit in that sense. And here he arrives in this space, and the relationship starts with a deceit, right? So she has already held him captive. So that part is kind of gone. And here is a woman who straight away says, I'm sorry about this happening, but this is what it is, this is my life, and I don't want to be alone here, right? She's making all the sexual advances, he's holding her captive, she's kind of behaving as the mother. He's like, okay, I mean, you can keep doing your tantrums, I'll be okay at the end of the day. I mean, like, it seems like she's the Buddha here. It seems like she's the one who has understood probably the meaninglessness of this freedom, or trying to run away somewhere or find some meaning in it more than anybody else, and she has accepted.
She's accepted her fate.
She has accepted her fate, and not fate in the sense that we could say that she's weaker in any way than anybody else out in the world. It's like so he's all the time as a man. What is he talking about? What does freedom mean to him? It's like going back to the city, having a name, his name printed because of finding some insect. He keeps talking about they'll find me. They will eventually find me, and nobody ever finds him. So he's 8 years there, nobody finds him. So it's like this hope that out there somewhere something is for you. Is kind of completely meaningless for him also, and makes him look stupid.
Well,
as well.
Outside valuation, outside praise, is something that he seeks. So,
right.
And he keeps comparing his fate to that of a dog. He's like, I'm not a dog, I'm not a dog, I'm not a dog. And, you're allowing yourself to be exploited. How can you do such a thing? Blah, 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 blah. So,
yeah, and then that dog and human beings thing keeps coming back in the film. Even the villagers say, you're not a dog. When they pull him out, and he keeps saying, we are human beings and we should be like that. So it's like, we can think, we can make meaning of life. But, eventually they're not getting to any meaning of life. Yeah, Don.
So, going to the male and female dynamic of it, also a God and nature dynamic. You know, you have the guy who tries to basically kind of subdue nature, the female, you know, version of God, and you know, then he gets to the point, you know, towards the end, you know, it's all this, I know better, I know this, you know, this way is going to be the best, and you know, he gets to the point, you know, at the end he's climbing that ladder, you know, and it's like he's literally kind of going to the next level, and he gets to that next level and he realizes, oh, I have no idea about nature, I have no idea about woman, you know, whether you're looking at it as a God, nature, man-woman dynamic, you know, you have this person who, you know, has that I'm the all-knowing thing, and then he gets out into the void, and he's like, yeah, I have no idea.
No, that's true, and I mean that's very straightforward. I mean, he keeps talking about, you know, we should rather than nature control us, we should control nature.
Yeah.
We should create opportunities here. You know, we
Well,
should
that-
have a resort. We should, and even in the end, he's trapped in that nature. We completely as an audience can see that you are completely trapped in this nature. You have no control over it.
Yeah.
It completely takes you, but he's still trying to figure that he has found some scientific formula from that nature, and he's going to tell the villagers about it, and he's going to find something, you know, powerful that will give him freedom, you know, and so he's kind of trying to make a meaning out of it. Yes, please.
Well, yeah, on the man-woman relationship, what I see is also a strong Japanese culture, and for Japanese culture, that woman is a very, very strong woman, you know. Like you said, Susan, was like obedient and kind of passive-aggressive.
Mhm.
It's like that is such a part of that Japanese culture, and even though she breaks out of that completely, which I thought was a very strong feminine culture character over the Japanese culture, and man always talking about business. I see still like a very strong Japanese culture
Right.
through the whole thing.
And I at least didn't see her submissive at all. At any places I saw her like more, I would say, evolved than the man, and more evolved of the understanding of the world. And I guess probably that's why.
Well, I say submissive because there are times in which he's kind of awful to her, and she's like, oh, you know. And I know that that's partly because she wants him to stay, and she's afraid of being alone and all of that. There are definitely moments when she's submissive, but I don't see her as completely submissive. The other thing about the man versus woman, and this is the case with any duality, is that the two opposites are kind of dependent on each other, so there's a symbiotic relationship. So, like, for instance, this has often been described as a psychosexual drama. So obviously they rely on each other sexually, and then they also rely on each other for survival. Like, they really can't survive alone. Like, she can't, the reason she's afraid is that she knows if she's alone she won't survive, and he certainly can't survive by himself. And look what happens when he tries to escape, he practically dies. And also, you know, if he weren't to pull his weight even in that little, you know, enclosure, they would probably die and get buried. So, I mean, that's also something. So they're not just oppositions, I guess, is what I would, or have oppositional relationships to each other.
No, they don't. And okay, I mean, I also, at least, you know, there is a lot of times we interpret that just through words and through gestures we see a certain kind of submissiveness. But you know, if you go beyond that, I mean, even if she's behaving, you know, I mean, he's asking, go get me a tea and all that kind of stuff, and she's bringing it. I mean, and she's behaving that way. Those gestures means kind of, to me at least, means nothing, almost nothing in terms of her power and her evolution in this game. I mean, she kind of from the get-go know the fate of the man. In a way, she's kind of completely aware that where is this going to lead? You eventually going to be helping here, be part of this, accept it, or you have no other fate, right? To me, I think she was completely aware of that from get-go. She was just going to see how it evolves, yeah.
Yeah, like going back to what Susan was saying about, her submissiveness and still being strong, she was submissive in order to manipulate.
That's why I say passive
Yeah,
aggressive.
yeah.
So even though she seems to be giving up control, she's molding, his outcome,
There's also, and this is related to kind of rural versus urban. I think, in a way, also they're kind of a microcosm of the community, right? And in urban culture, it's very individualistic in general. I'm making a generalization, but in general, it's much more individualistic. You don't really interact with people as much. You kind of keep to yourself, and communities are very fragmented and so on and so forth. In more rural communities, you kind of have to depend on each other because you don't have, things as close to you. You might have a hospital far away, or whatever. Community tends to be stronger. So that idea that the man and the woman need each other to survive, that the man and the woman need to survive so that the village survives. She's talking about how no one wants to live there anymore. Well, big surprise, but so they all kind of help each other out in different ways, and even in the end, she'd probably die if they didn't come and take her to a hospital. So, because they're so isolated.
And that's why, I agree with you, so multi-layered. I think that's the whole thing about urban and rural, to me, in reading this is more of the first layer, and it's more of the less important layer for Hiroshi. I think, and all that's fine, you need to get a radio, you need to get in touch with that, but I think what he's trying to tell a tale which is kind of universal. He's trying to get to a subject. It doesn't matter what if it was a urban world out there or not, or if it was any other world. It's about, I think the world of man, woman, and the sand is the world that he has created for man, woman, and any kind of a nature, our lives, wherever we are. This is also this is also a play that, the men from urban society or high caste society, they have been abusing us all along. And so, for them, it's a kind of a justification of doing this to them. But what filmmaker is saying, it's not a justification. But we just see at the end of the day, it's a microcosm of that whole society. The whole representation is that. I want to ask you, what do you make of the scene where the villagers are giving him an opportunity that, okay, we'll let you go to the sea, make out with this woman. What do you make of that? What do you make of the reaction of the woman in that scene?
What do I make of that?
And, as much as it is a thing on male and female, to me it's this nature and man kind of collision that we're dealing with. And you have the point where, you abuse something and whatnot, and then you realize that, not only can you harm this thing, but you can also help in repairing it.
To me, like I've and maybe that's my personal reading, but I've been constantly reading that, and that's why the film is called Women in the Dunes, not Men in the Dunes, right? It's like, and the film opens with the man, right? It could easily have been called Men in the Dunes. To me, she is the evolved one. To me, she is the one who has understood it. So it's like he still is ready, and again, there is no love dynamic here, pretty much, right? It's a sex dynamic. It's a erotic dynamic here. There's no love dynamic happening between, and she's very clear about. She's more clear about that relationship than him, right? Ever. Even in her nudity, even in her sex, she's okay. And you see him for the very first time looking at her, and he's like a little bit like confused and shaken, and he's dealing with morality through and through in the film. So just let me give you some more examples. So when she talks about, they talk about the sand to be given to the city for the cement and all that, and he keeps coming up with this moral question. It's like, what if people will die with this? And she's like, so what do I have to do with it, right? And on other hand, he can be that moral immoral when she's saying, if you leave, 2 other houses will also go away. But in that moment, for him to leave is like, you all can die in the sand, I don't give a damn. So this morality is completely screwed up for him. But just coming up to that part about this village, so she is, to me, she is so evolved that when she's getting sexually attached to him, it's for sex, it's for her, it's not for anything else. But he, for going to a sea for 30 minutes, would do this act in front of the villagers. He's ready to do that, but she would not do that. To me, she's holding on to her dignity. I mean, she's holding on to her honor more than he ever had. Even in the moment when he has tied her up, she's the mother, right? She's like, okay, you how long you gonna do this? I mean, and what you gonna get out of this? So I see her more at comfort, at peace with her existence, if you can go back to that term.
I don't know if she's at peace with it. I think she's resigned to it.
Yeah,
Well, and that's the most important question then. Then that resignation and peace, where do we land
So-
in terms of the meaning of life?
To me, it's, that resignation is, she understands she's going to envelop him in the end. In the end, she wins. Just like her submissive, in order to manipulate before, she isn't worried about the short-term gain. She's playing the long game.
I don't even know if she's playing. You used the word manipulation before also, and I'm wondering if she's playing. I do not think she's playing, and she has to play anything. I personally don't think so. Because if it's not him, there's going to be a postman, there's going to be a salesman. She has agreed. She has kind of accepted her life in that environment and understood her life. I don't know if she has this real goal to manipulate him, because she's not going to go up the ladder and get a man there. Villager's going to deliver somebody. So, and they're going to take, because villagers also don't want her there by herself. They're going to provide help. They have the helper's tool ready. They have the rations ready. So I don't know if she's kind of there figuring it out, how I'm going to keep somebody here. Of course she likes it. No denial of that. She don't want to be alone.
Going back is going, whatever you're doing is basically, null and void, because in the end, you have no idea what you're doing because you're trying to subdue me without ever trying to understand me. And so therefore, you're going to repeat this over and over again. And at the end of the film, when he gets to that point, when he gets to the void, he realizes, I'm lost. It's because he started out saying, I know everything. And if he knew everything, he wouldn't be at that point.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, and it just kind of reminds me of the opening shot of the film. And there are two places where it's very striking how the dissolves have happened in the film. So you open the film with these very, very minute, tiny cells. You come to the sand, and then you come to the man. It's just kind of a representation that you're so small in this world, and you think you know everything, and you think you can control it, but not. So that's one time it happens, and the second time, I think, after that, the second time has happened when you have the close-up of man's eyes, and then you have a dissolve happening into the woman lying, and then you have another dissolve going into the sand. So again, man, woman, and the nature. Those are the two very, very striking times he plays with that, and kind of sort of telling us our fate, probably. What in his mind is. I mean, so I guess, okay. I think my last question would be, which is again personally important to me. Is it an optimist film? Is it a pessimist film? Is it a cynical film? What do we make out of it? What do we make as a filmmaker? Where does he? As an audience, where do you take his statement?
That article that she just read was exactly what I was thinking the whole time. As soon as he makes the comment, are you shoveling sand to live or living to shovel sand? I was like, this is the modern workforce. There's this thing we have to do our whole lives to get, as you say, the barest essentials. And ultimately, the
Yeah, the vast majority of work isn't very meaningful. I mean, there are jobs that I think that are meaningful, but they're few and far between, and I think the vast majority of human labor is pretty meaningless and boring.
Few meaningful jobs that they feel fulfilled at.
Most people don't, yeah.
But can you find peace in that?
And I think that's what he ends up doing, is that he ends up finding peace in it, and I think he ends up finding some meaning and some value. That's why he's so excited about the water, because he's like, even in this situation where he's essentially imprisoned in some way or another, at some point he gets value out of it. So I think there's both, not cynical, but I would say, an aspect of the film that's critical of modern society. But then there's also, I think, a bit of a hopeful end to it, or at least something suggesting at hope.
You think so?
At the end, yeah,
I think
do.
Hiroshi is pretty much saying, you were stupid, you are stupid, you will stay stupid.
Yeah.
I don't think he's giving any hope. I think he's just pretty much, by him doing that, he's making a very existentialist, and you use the term Sisyphean statement very clearly. You're going to take this rock up the hill, it's going to fall that side, you're going to bring it from there up the hill, it's going to fall this side.
But-
you're going to find meaning in that, you're going to find peace in that, and that's the nature for you.
But in the
And-
meantime, he's found water, which is
yeah,
really important.
which is his rock. But that's what I'm saying. So that's his rock, and he's found it, and he's gonna find meaning in that, and he's gonna live a life around it.
The moment he climbed out of his hole and saw the sea, and it's like, so much water, it's like, it's not that special because there's so much water out here, he went straight back in the hole.
Well, he's accepted his fate. He glimpses at that freedom, that openness and space, and he says, you know what? It doesn't really. I don't need it.
Well, I think
It's
that's
back.
kind of it though. Like, he's confined by what he thinks he knows, and he's set free, understanding that he doesn't know anything. You know, when he thinks he has all the answers, you know,
Well-
he's confined. He's put in that cage, you know, because he thinks what he thinks is the truth. And then he climbs up the ladder and goes to the next level. And he looks into the void and he realizes, I don't know anything. You know, and by that, he's set free and he can go about and do anything.
And Don, I think that's what pretty much, in terms of, like we said, these are archetype characters, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what their purpose is also. At the end of the day, I think the bottom line statement, what's being made here is that, okay, yes, and which is it's just the existential statement. I see it just completely underlined that life is meaningless, and we're gonna find and create meaning out of it. I mean, there are prisons all around us, and they will stay around us. We will just.
Life is meaningless, though. You know, life is meaningless when you think you know all about life. Because then what's the point? If you already know everything, what's the point?
No, I mean, it's meaningless in the sense that you try to give it some meaning. That's what I meant. You try to find some meaning in it, and he finds her meaning in it. She had find her meaning in it. So I think it's that journey to come to an understanding with life, and not an understanding, like you use all the dualities pretty much, and it's that understanding: are we man, are we woman, are we free, are we slave? All the dualities that you used is pretty much, we come back to that and somewhere find our space within it, or traveling through it all along, probably a journey of finding meanings in that.
So
Yeah.
do you have a theory on why the first child you see is just at the end and what that meant? The little boy looking down?
No, why do you say first child? Because her husband and child one has already been buried, so it's not the first child she had.
It's the first child you see.
Doesn't he run into a little kid and scare them when he's trying to run away?
You mean the first child he see in the very, very end,
Yeah.
who looks at him.
Who looks down and sees him with the water. Does that mean
That's an interesting question.
To me, that's
I-
the onset of a new beginning.
I think, you know, one is that definitely cycle, and the child is out there and he's looking at both sides of it. He's kind of he can look at the sandpit. He has that world to look at. So he's kind of, you know, he can make his decisions still, you know. And again, that childlike thing is always, you know, we always go back to, you know, we're still not completely formed into being a man or a woman or a free or a slave, and there is still possibilities and all that. So I definitely like to see it like that.
I would
Yeah.
just say it's the next generation looking at whatever their fate is. You know, he's looking at the whole scene, that's going to be his fate. There you go, that's your life. And for a lot of people, that's the case. You know, that's really, you know, it's
And
pretty
probably
much
it's
predetermined.
Hiroshi, the director, coming in the end and saying, look, if you want to look at this world, pretty much look at childlike eyes, probably you'll be able to find some better meanings.